There we go. I'm unmuted now. How's everyone? Welcome to another Tutorial Tuesday. Oh, found my pen. All right. So, how's everyone doing today? Tonight? I guess it depends where you are in the world or when you're watching the replay. Today, what we're going to be talking about is body proportions for people. Hey, Green Count, glad to see ya. Okay, well, first let's see. Let's get the proper colors. Let's get the proper drawing tools ready here. Okay. Hey, and sideways is there too. Awesome. All right. Let's get a little drink of water. All right. Okay, so today we're talking about body proportions, human body proportions. Now, when we're talking about people, or really any kind of animal we're drawing, you have to talk in terms of proportions. You can't measure things out using inches or feet or meters or anything like that because people are different sizes. So people who are taller, parts of their body are larger. People who are shorter, the same parts are smaller. They're all in proportion. Now, of course, everyone's different, so you're going to get, when we talk through these proportions, someone might have, their arms might be slightly longer, or their head might be slightly bigger, or their, legs might be slightly longer. But it's never going to be drastic. Like when we finally get to like how long the arms are, you're never going to have someone's arms coming down past their knees. It's always going to be within a reasonable relative size. So, and that's one of the reasons why when you meet someone maybe you've seen on TV a lot and you think, wow, they're taller than I thought or shorter than I thought. It's because when you see someone on television and there's no point of reference for how big or small they are, they look the same size as anyone else because their proportions are the same. So a 4-foot person looks the same as a 7-foot person without any context with height. So with all of that in mind, first things first, I'm going to play some music for myself. All right. So let's get to actual proportions here. So the best way to measure is by head lengths. Head from top to bottom of your head is about. It's not too big where it's hard to measure the smaller parts of your body, but it's not too small where you have to measure like 30 of it to just get the regular height. So, with that in mind, using our head as our standard measuring stick here, our bodies average between 7 and 7.5 heads tall. So the distance from here to here, so about 7 to 7.5. So obviously our first head length is our head here. So if I measure the distance, and I know you can't quite see what I'm doing with my hands on the screen, I'm taking my pencil and I'm kind of measuring using the tip here as my starting point and kind of moving my fingers to where the end point is and using that as my standard measuring on my screen. So you can't see me doing this. I'll make marks on my screen so you can see, but like I say, oh, here's the head length, all right, and then one head length down, and so on and so forth. So just so you kind of know what I'm doing here. So first head length is the head. So if I measure that, move one head length down. Check that, that's close enough. Actually, before I actually reveal here what the second head length is, let's talk about what's in between. So we got our shoulders here in between. And I guess this is also a good time to say, if while I'm doing this, of course there's going to be a lag, but if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Like if I go over something too fast or you didn't understand what I said, just throw your question in the chat and I'll address it when I see it. All right, so obviously we have our neck and our shoulders. The neck isn't as big as everyone thinks. People want to make the neck like really long. It's only maybe about a quarter of a head length. Yeah, I would say about a quarter. And then the width of our shoulders is, if you measure the head from top to bottom here and just kind of flipped it on its side. So basically the head length here, and if I moved it sideways, so a head length from here to here is the same as from here to there, and that's about how wide the shoulders are going to be. Measure on the same side over here. So that's about where the shoulders are going to be there. And so obviously we have our collarbone in between. That's a poorly drawn. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So we have the collarbone. And we have our chest. So one head length down from our head is actually going to be the bottom of our chest. And it's really important when you're drawing the chest, and it doesn't matter if it's a man's or woman's chest, you have to draw it from, the chest has to come from the armpits. Kind of like what I'm doing here. Now, if we have enough time, I might get into the very specifics of the anatomy, like, hold on here. Down is going to be here. I'll get into the specifics of the anatomy, like how the chest muscles should look, or what have you. But regardless, you want to make sure that they connect to the armpits. Very, very often, I see people wanting to make the chest kind of connect to the collarbone here. And though there is some parts of the collarbone, or parts of the chest muscle that go up towards the collarbone, if you're drawing the chest kind of up here, it's going to look kind of weird. You want to make sure the chest comes down from the armpits and is one head length down from the head. Forgive my sketchiness of my figure today. I'm not going to worry about getting anatomy too perfect for right now. Anyway, all right. So next head length down. Actually, I'm curious in the chat. Do you guys have any guesses where the next head length down is? Oops. The navel? That's actually a pretty good guess. Not quite, though. Also close, but not quite. So if I measure, sorry, I got one head length down here. Next head length down is actually, simply put, is just going to be our waist, kind of where the where your belt would sit. So third head length down, I'll just put belt here. Now, I wasn't planning to go in too much detail about this, but I guess now's a good time to mention it. If you're drawing a male figure, chances are, if you're just drawing an average male figure, the torso here is going to be pretty straight down. There's not going to be a big curve to it. There's not going to be a huge size. Now, if we were drawing superheroes, you know, there'd probably be like a huge, like, Dorito shape that we'd get for the torso. But your average guy, you're just going to have straight down. If it was more feminine shape, it's going to be a little bit more of a curve to it. But we can talk a little bit more in detail on that a little bit later. So third head length down, the belt or waist, whatever's easier for you. Throw a little stomach in here. All right. Any guesses of what the fourth head length is? Where that lines up on our body? The wrist? We'll talk about the arms in a second. Let's keep it all in reference to the actual body itself. The main trunk of the body, I should say. Although the wrist probably is a good way to think of it. Half head below the crotch line. Kind of. All right, so you're all of it very, very close. So the next head length down is mid-thighs. So if I measure my head length again, go one head length down, so that's going to be here. So the fourth head length is mid-thigh. Now the one thing you want to think about though is where does the legs connect to the body? Because our legs don't connect to our belts. That doesn't make any sense. We have our hips in between. So typically, I think of the hips, as kind of about a third of this next head length. Of course, I'm keeping this simple. I'm symbolizing, or representing the hips with just a rectangle here. And you want to imagine, if this was our pelvic bone here, our leg's attached to the outside of that. Our leg joint isn't underneath our body, it's on the outside of our body. And so if we kind of imagine kind of our leg bones, even though if our legs are straight down, they're going to kind of point in like this. And so legs are going to look... This guy has kind of skinny legs, but we'll make it work. So the fourth head length is going to be right in the middle of the thighs there. And if the fourth head length is in the middle of the thighs, that means the fifth head length is going to be right here, and that's going to be the bottom of the knees. So I'm going to draw two circles here. These are going to represent our knees. And so this fifth head length is right at the bottom of them. Bottom of knees. All right. So I'm going to mention something that I see a lot at this point. There seems to be, when most people are learning to draw, they have this kind of gut resistance, I think, to how long your legs actually are. If you think about it, our legs are the biggest and strongest muscles in our body, which also makes sense when you think about it, because that's the part of our body that moves the rest of our body. Like, all of our motion is based in our legs. We walk, and we don't walk on four legs, we walk on two. So our legs have to support our entire body and move it around. So of course it's our biggest and strongest part of our body. So with that in mind, your legs, if you measure from your waist to your feet, is going to be taller than from your waist to your head. The lower half of your body is not really half, it's more than half of your body. It just feels like the upper part of our body should be bigger, because that's what houses all the important parts of us, like our organs, our brain. Our kneecaps aren't exactly a vital part of our body, so we don't really think about it that much, but that's the part that moves us. That's the biggest and strongest part of our body. So when you're drawing this and you start to feel like, oh no, I made the legs a little too long, it's probably okay. If you think to yourself, wow, I made the legs way too long, you probably just made them a little too long. I don't know if that makes sense, but keep that in mind when you're doing it, when you're drawing here. So I'm going to show you a shortcut for this next part here. So measure out my head lengths. 6 head length is about here. But again, here's a shortcut. The upper part of our leg, from our hip here to our knee, is exactly the same length as from our knee to our ankle. So if I measure that distance and I bring it down, the ankle, if that's equal in size, and it looks like it is, so my ankles should be right there. So I already know where my knees are, I know where my ankles are, I can just draw my calf and shins here. And so just so we have kind of a marker here, the 6 head length I would say is the shins. And so the ankles mostly fall here on 6.5. And then obviously, if the 6th head length is the shins, that means the 7th head length has to be the feet. Measure that a little bit off there. All right. Wow, this is looking a mess. Hopefully you guys are able to follow though. Are all of you guys with me so far? Is this making sense? You following along okay? Before we move on to the arms? Good so far. All right. All right. Now for the arms. Now our arms, so far so good. Awesome. So our arms from shoulder to fingertip Sometimes I forget which way my camera's pointed. So from shoulder to fingertip here is 3 head lengths long total. Now, obviously, hopefully, it's not 3 equal parts because our hand isn't as big as our head, which means our forearm and upper arm have to be bigger than our heads. Not a lot, but a little. So if I measure out a head length here, go from the shoulder and go a little bit longer, the arm should be right, the upper arm, I should say, is going to go right about there. Now, a way to double check this is the elbow should be right above where you think the belly button should be. Now, just like our legs, our arms from our shoulder to our wrist, from our shoulder to the elbow is the same distance from our elbow to the wrist. So I have my arms here drawn from the shoulder to the elbow. If I bring that down, the wrist should be right about there. Again, if we have time, I might talk a little bit about the specifics of the anatomy. But right now, I just want to focus on the proportions. So measure from the shoulder to the elbow, elbow to the wrist. And last but not least, of course, is the hand. And the hand, like I just said, the hand is about as big as your face, which is about 3/4, so maybe about there onto the head. It's about 3/4 of the head length. Now you know you've done it right, is if you measure that 3/4 of a head and bring it down, the fingertips should line up right with the 4th head length there. Look at that beautiful hand. It's not beautiful. Same thing here. So 3/4, just bring it down there. Man, these are crummy hands. You guys get the point. There we have it. That is our basic human proportions. So I'm going to open it up real quick for questions before I start talking about related subject, but it still has to do with proportions, but not specifically these proportions. So before I start getting into like exceptions and variations, I want to just make sure there are no questions on the standard proportions. Head proportions laterally. That's actually, you bring up a good point. There are no proportions side to side. People could be all sorts of widths. both in their head, their shoulders. There is no correct width. I did mention in the shoulders are going to be one head length wide, and we're going to talk about, again, variations in a second. Now this is true for men and women. Shoulders are going to be one head length wide. If they seem like they're bigger or smaller, it's because typically the person is either very muscular, so their larger shoulder muscles give the appearance of a wider frame, or they're skinny, so they look thinner, or the shoulders seem thinner, or just how their shoulders sit. Like, if I stand with my shoulders kind of up, I'm going to look broader. If I kind of bring my shoulders down, because they're sloped down, they're going to look smaller, or my shoulders will seem more narrow. But as far as actual width, some people could be very skinny, some people could be very wide. Same thing with the head. Some people have very skinny heads and tall, skinny heads. You know, or someone can have a very, very wide and broad head. There's no right or wrong when it comes to that. It's just, how does the person look? So, the rib cage, the rib cage does just depend on the person. We all have the same number of ribs, but how they're kind of positioned in us could be a little bit different. And in all honesty, our ribs, unless you are so skinny that you can just see all your ribs, it's going to be covered up by flesh and muscle more than anything else. Like, if you're drawing kind of like a superhero here, the rib, if I have to nail it down, the rib cage usually comes down to about where the elbows are. That's usually where the rib cage will sit. But chances are, especially if you're drawing superheroes or very physically fit people, you're not going to see those ribs. You're going to see, you know, their abs. They're going to see the muscles that kind of come around more than any ribs. So, all right, so let's bring up a new thing. Now, that was obviously for adults, adult proportions. So, anyone that's younger than like a full-grown adult, teenagers, kids, their proportions are going to be different. And there's no set one. Like with adults here, this is pretty set with only a small variance. Kids are going to have a wide variance. But the one thing that's always going to be consistent is their head is going to be bigger. So the bigger, the younger they are, the bigger their head is going to be compared to their bodies. So like a young child, I'm just going to kind of just throw this down. You know, a young child here, I don't know how old a kid like this might be, but let's see, 1, 2, so they're about 3 heads tall. So then maybe this is like a young kid, maybe 3 years old, 2, 3. You know, where, let's say like an older teenager, they might be maybe like 5 heads tall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they might be about this tall here. Now, the reason I can't give like definite numbers is because kids grow at crazy different rates. if anyone is ever around kids, it has kids, their teachers, you might find 10-year-olds that look like 16-year-olds and 16-year-olds that look like 10-year-olds, because they're growing and everyone grows at a different rate. So you can't say for sure for sure that a teenager is going to be exactly 5.5 heads tall. That might be a good rule of thumb, but you can't say with certainty. So maybe this might be actually, I did about 5 heads tall. I would say maybe this looks like maybe a younger teenager, maybe like a 13-year-old. So, with this in mind, since you can't hammer down exactly how many head proportions you're going to get with a younger character you might be drawing, there's certain things that are always going to be true that you have to nail down no matter whether or not the kid is 2 years old or 42 years old. And those factors here are, one, the upper leg, like from the hips to the knee, is always going to be the same size as from the knee to the ankle. So these two are always going to be equal in size. It doesn't matter how old they are. Same thing with the arm. From the shoulder to the elbow is going to always be equal to elbow to the wrist. It does not matter how. So that's going to be equal in size too. Doesn't matter if they're an infant, newborn, or really old. Another thing that's always going to be the same no matter how old they are, their fingertips. Here, let me draw a belt here so it makes this a little bit easier. Their fingertips here is always going to be mid-thigh. So this arm is a little too short here. Of course, I'm drawing very simplistic figures here. But again, it doesn't matter if you're drawing a teenager, a child, an adult. The fingertips always have to hit that mid-thigh part of the body. And this one is less of an always and more of a most of the time thing. And that's the hand is going to be as big as the face. So let's measure that out. Nope, so I should make this hand just a little bit bigger here. Now the reason I say it's a most of the time thing is because I'm sure most of you have seen a baby before. If the baby always has its like whole hand in its mouth, obviously its hand is not as big as its face. So as you get older, your hands get bigger proportionately with your body. But once you start getting to the ages where you're walking around, that's when the hand is going to reach face size. It's a weird sentence to say. So those are kind of some of the exceptions, or less of an exception. Those are the always true. There's never really an exception when it comes to the arms and legs being equal in size, the tops and the upper and lower parts, and the hands reaching mid-thigh. Now, these ideas apply to even when you're drawing like cartoon characters. Let's create a new layer here. So if you're kind of drawing like just like a cute character here. This is legally distinct mouse character. So I'm drawing this mouse character. I don't know why I drew him at such a weird angle. So I'm drawing this cartoon character here. If I draw the legs, it doesn't matter if I make the legs long or short. The distance from the hips to the knee needs to be the same size as from the knee to the ankle. Even if I give them proportionately too short legs, they need to be equal in size. And their arms, same thing. And ideally you want the fingertips to reach mid-thigh there. Mouse character, yep. This is my OC mouse character, do not steal. So here's the mid-thigh, the fingertips reach mid-thigh. I can make the hands rather large if I want, because the head is long, and I would want it to be close to the size of the face. Like I said, the hands being the size of the face is kind of a mostly true kind of thing, and less of a always true. But what is always true, you want the hands to reach the mid-thigh, you want to have the upper and lower legs being the same size, and the upper and lower arms being the same, equal in size. So I'm curious if you guys can figure this out. Legally distinct, yep. So when or why do you guys think I would break these rules? Because there's always a reason in art to break a rule, but you can't just break these rules arbitrarily. If you're just arbitrarily breaking art rules, you're gonna have bad art. So when you break these rules, it has to be intentional to serve a purpose. So let's see if you guys know why. So a question here. In extraordinary cases, like for dwarves, you keep the symmetry of the arms and legs, shoulders to elbows, but you would shorten the limbs in relative to their body. Yep. So if I was to draw let's say like a Tolkien-esque dwarf, relatively speaking, I'd probably give them a larger head. I'll give them cool helmet here. Crazy long beard. So I'd probably kind of keep them relatively to the head, have the shoulder width not as wide. So when we're talking in terms of head proportions, if I measure the head, this dwarf I'm making is 1, 2, 3, 3.5 heads tall. But, even if I'm going to give him like huge, crazy, awesome shoulder pads here, because he's just that kind of awesome dwarf, his arms the elbows are still going to be about where his belly button is, and his hands are still going to end up mid-thigh here. So if this is where his knees would be, his elbows are still going to be mid-thigh. Or I'm sorry, mid-thigh. His elbows are still going to be on where the elbow or the belly button is, and his hands are going to be mid-thigh. And the shoulders to elbows will be equal to elbows to wrists. Hips to knees are going to be equal to knees to ankles. I hope that answers your question, Green Count. Awesome. All right, so back to my original question here. So we're talking about... Whoops, that's not what I was drawing. That was from last stream. Anyway, so first we talked about your standard human proportions. And then we talked about like some kid proportions. And then some like other exceptions to body proportions. But so my question to the chat is, when would I break these rules? When would I do it on purpose? When would I not have the proper head lengths here? When would I make it so the distance from the elbow to the shoulder is not equal to the elbow to the wrist? Or from the hips to the knee is not equal to knee to the ankles? I'm curious if in the chat any of you guys have any ideas when or why I would break these rules. So to go taller heroic proportions, or to make a more imposing character, or perhaps to lengthen the limbs to make them... Now, if you wanted to make a bigger character, say like the Hulk, you would abandon the head proportions of like this if you were making the Hulk, but you would not abandon the shoulders are still going to be equal in size from the elbows to the shoulder and the elbows to the wrist. The hips to the knees is still going to be the same size as from the knee to the ankles. Those are all going to be equal in size, no matter if you're making a gigantic character like the Hulk or just your average person there. I have no idea, to be honest. I have been assuming the concept artists broke them, just splash out in many ideas. Yeah, okay, so it seems like you guys, to make bigger characters like the Hulk, or even like if you wanted Captain America just to look like big, you might make the character, instead of 7 heads tall, maybe 8 heads tall, and then just lengthen everything a little bit the same. But the ones that I was talking about a little bit earlier, like this, the rules that never get broken, like the distance to the shoulders to the elbow, the hands being mid-thigh, that always stays the same unless you are making monsters. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen Attack on Titan, but if you've ever seen the Titans in Attack on Titan, and you think to yourself, those Titans are just really unsettling. And the reason they look so unsettling is because their proportions are way off. And they're purposely done that way. I'm hoping you guys can see with my creature maker here that by making these proportions purposely wrong, I'm making a very, very unsettling looking creature. So with this example here, I totally messed with the proportions. The distance from the head to the waist is 1, 2, 3, 4. But then we have the upper arm here is not anywhere close to the size of the lower arm. And it's even different on this arm. The distance here, so the upper arm here only comes to here on this bottom part of the arm. Same thing with the legs. The distance from the hips to the knees only comes to the shins on the lower leg. The hands are way too big and come down past the knees. The feet are way too small for the body it's standing on. And if we measured the full head lengths, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 heads tall. So by totally messing up these proportions, I've created, at least, if you disagree in the chat, let me know. But I think this is kind of an unsettling looking creature. Before you even start throwing any details in to the monster, if I saw something like this walking down the street, I would definitely run away as fast as I can. And so that's when you break the proportions on purpose, is when you want an unsettling looking monster. The Attack on Titan Titans do this. If you look at like a lot of Resident Evil and Silent Hill monsters, they totally mess with the proportions. That's how you get very Nosferatu. Yeah, only Nosferatu did have very large hands. But yeah, so that's when you purposely break it. If you do not want an unsettling looking creature, you want to make sure, and I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's really worth repeating. The distance from the shoulder to the elbow needs to be equal to the elbow to the wrist. The distance from the hips to the knees need to be the same size as from the knees to the ankles. The bottom of the hands need to reach mid-thigh. And the hands ideally should be as big as the face. Although, as I mentioned before, there are times when you might break that rule. Bloodlines 2 is coming out in a couple of years. Yeah. So that's a lot of the gist. So we have our standard human proportions. We have kid proportions. We have some fantasy rules here, and then we have when to break the rules, or why to break the rules. Do you guys have any questions? Questions, concerns, fears, existential crises? Just a chronic lack of 4 million. You and me both. Personally, with the Attack on Titans, the ones that creep me out the most are the ones that have like the comically large heads. They look like they have little baby bodies. So they always have like really short arms. Anthropomorphic humanoids fall under... Oh, breaking the rule. That's actually an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. Good question, Bubonic One. All right, so anthropomorphics. That one's a hard... That one does not have a straightforward answer because it depends on how anthropomorphic you're going. So I'm assuming when you say anthropomorphic, you mean specifically animal anthropomorphics? Because anthropomorphic, I know, has the connotation that it's animal, humanoid animals, but anthropomorphic means literally anything that takes on the traits of humans, like the Pixar cars. Those cars are anthropomorphic. Anything that is changed to take on human qualities is anthropomorphic. So, but I'm assuming you mean animal anthropomorphics. And to answer that, it depends on how much we're going animal. If it's going to be mostly very animalistic with only a little bit of human qualities, say like Bambi, if we're going to keep on using Disney references, or is it going to be way more human than animal? So depending on your answer there, it could break all the rules or it could break none of the rules. So let's do kind of like maybe a half and a half here. Let's do like maybe a werewolf. That's one that most people have solid in their head. A very anthropomorphic werewolf. So those proportions, you can't, it's very difficult because we have an animal looking head, or you said it like a weasel face. It's hard to measure how many heads tall because they have a very differently shaped head. But usually what I try to imagine, so let's say I'm doing kind of a werewolf here, because I know how to draw a wolf head off the top of my head. I would have to look up references for a weasel. Hope you guys don't mind my super sketchy drawing on the fly technique here. All right. So I can't really measure the head this way because of how the general shape of the face. So I'll still use the height of the head as my general measuring stick. So if I measure the height of the head here, go one head length down, the muscles, or the chest muscles will be there. So since I'm drawing this kind of werewolf-y character, it's probably going to keep that, the torso, I'll probably keep the proportions too. I might broaden the shoulders a little bit just because in my head a werewolf would be very muscular. Next head length down, the waist. Now this is where it'll probably start varying. So when I imagine a creature like this, I imagine it's going to have the limbs that are going to be more animalistic than human. Like I imagine the torso is probably going to be more human than animal. I imagine the limbs are going to be more animal than human. And I don't want you guys to take what I'm saying as like gospel here. When we're talking about anthropomorphic anything, whether it's animals, cars, it's really up to the artist to decide what features are important to feature and downplay or exaggerate. So in my head, this is how I would do it. This isn't the only way to do it. So with that in mind, I'd probably make the legs just a little bit longer than how I'd normally do it with a human. Simply because of how wolf and dog legs are. Please forgive the pose too. I'm doing this without really thinking ahead. Okay, so we have the knees here, they kind of bend back. And then the feet kind of come forward like this from the ankle here. So let's see, if I was doing this normally, chest, waist, mid-thigh, bottom of the knees to ankles. So, here, let me shrink this down a little bit. I'm running out of my own room here. Oh, that looks awful. I'm a little embarrassed. All right, let me retry this here real. So we have the leg coming down here. Leg would kind of bend backwards. And I even did werewolves for one of my comics. All right. This comes down here. That looks a little bit better. Hopefully, despite my inability to get a properly drawn wolf leg here, my point that I'm trying to get across is if I measure the head here, one head length down is the chest, next head length down is the waist, just like how a normal human would be. Next head length down is mid-thigh, which is kind of true here. Next head length down would be bottom of the knee. You kind of miss that part, but because wolf legs are different, the back of the legs would kind of... their knees bend back just like ours, but then they have an ankle and a very large foot. So, with the head length, knees there, so ankles would be here. So the proportions are close, but not quite the same. And then what I definitely would do, just because I think it looks cool, is if I was drawing the arms, I'd create very large arms with very large claws here. And this again would be breaking your standard Like I would probably have the arms coming, or I'm sorry, the hands coming down to about where the knees are. Now, I just want to stress, this is my interpretation of how I would handle a werewolf, and a quick one at that. If I was to be seriously making an illustration of a werewolf right now, I would be looking up...
I don't know what that means.
Siri, start talking to me. I would probably be Googling, wolf anatomy and seeing what I can match up with human anatomy, what parts I would want to keep, what parts I would want to get rid of, what parts I would want to exaggerate. The more I'm looking at this, the more I think I would actually make his legs a little bit shorter. And again, this is just my own aesthetics here. But I think it would look better if he was very top-heavy. But I think, regardless of what your aesthetics are, hopefully it comes across that bottom line is, it depends. What do you want your anthropomorphic character to look like? Do you want it to look more animalistic, more monstrous? Do you want it to look more human? Do you want it to look more just like an animal? And based on those proportions, or based on what you want, you're going to choose the proportions that are more appropriate. If you want to have more human-looking anthropomorphic animal, you'll have more standard human proportions like this. If you want more monstrous, like a werewolf, you're going to totally change the proportions. Like this one, specifically the rules I broke, the shoulder to the elbow is still equal to elbow to the wrist. These are still equal. But the hands obviously come way down past mid-thigh. They come down to the knees. And I can't even measure how the upper leg and lower leg is equal because we have 3 parts to our leg here. We have the upper leg, lower leg, and then a very elongated foot. So we can't even use the same proportions there. And now I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with this. So I hope that answers your question, Bubonic One. And if it didn't, I'm sorry. Feel free to elaborate on the question if I missed something that you were looking. If you're looking for a specific answer and I totally missed it, feel free to follow up. And that goes with all of you guys. If you asked a question and I kind of danced around the answer you're looking for, feel free to follow up with another question or a more specific version of that same question. And while I wait for you guys to respond or ask more questions, I'll ask you guys another question. Would you guys prefer, because we've been going for about an hour now, would you prefer that I go into some general anatomy things, like maybe I talk a little bit about like the shape of legs and arms, human ones specifically, or would you prefer to just watch me work on a piece of art? Like I can come back to this commission that I started on Saturday. So let me know, again, if you have any questions or which part you would like me to do next. Yeah, you're exactly right, Bubonic One. Look at a picture of a weasel and extrapolate. The easy, I say easy part of, if you want, I would like information on muscles. Okay, we can talk muscles. You mentioned a possible future. Any tips on setting figure? One of those cool 3-point perspective shots. Yeah, that's definitely another topic for another day. Trying to drawing up a character in a 3-point perspective. That's something that would definitely just totally consume a future stream. So we can do that in the future. So we're gonna take a couple steps back about the anthropomorphics. If you're doing an animal anthropomorphic, specifically one of a mammal, say a weasel, a wolf, cat, dog, any mammal, maybe not whales, but they have essentially the same anatomy as humans on a basic level. Like they have the 2 bones in their forearm, the 2 bones in like your shins, hip bones, rib cages, vertebrae, the spinal cord, and even the muscle structure, though not exactly the same, closely resemble each other. So if you take the time to study human anatomy and study an animal's anatomy, you'll start to see the similarities and be able to very easily transfer one to the other. See if you want the weasel's face and a human's body, but weasel tail and weasel feet, but human legs or human-esque legs. You'll be able to put all that together the more you study the anatomy of whatever it is you're trying to anthropomorphize. And that's true with anything, really, whether you want to anthropomorphize cars or animals or your toaster. But it's easier with mammals since humans and mammals have very, very, very similar anatomy, pieces of anatomy. All right, so coming down, so 3-point perspective, we're going to do that in another stream. So let's talk muscles then. Gothic Lolita, do you, is there a specific muscle group you want me to start with? Like arms, legs, torso? I know Sideways in a previous stream you talked about wanting to know more about muscles. Was there a specific muscle group that you would like, that you're interested in? Man, I can't talk today. Chest and maybe arms. Okay. Would that be okay with you, Gothic Lolita, Angel? If we we'll start with the torso muscles. And stomach. Yeah, we'll just do the whole yeah, you agree. Okay, good. All right, so what I'm kind of sketching out here, this is the neck here. And this is, I'm being very bad at my anatomy. I forget the top muscle here. That's technically part of your back, but it's visible with your neck. Now that always slopes at a downward angle. Of course, if you're drawing like super muscular characters, like that might bulge out like that. But typically, your average person, that muscle kind of comes down this way. Then you have your collarbone. A good way, if you're not quite sure how to draw your collarbone, think of one of those wire coat hangers. It's not the best drawn, but you'll get the point in a sec. So imagine one of these, hey, Seth is here. So if you imagine like one of these wire coat hangers, and you kind of turn it upside down, and then you just kind of erase the crossbar of your coat hanger here, and obviously the hook part. You have your collarbone. Now this is a little bit lower than how I usually like to draw the collarbone. How low it is really just depends on the angle of the body. If we're looking straight on, usually it's a little bit higher up here. But the shape is the same. And then we have two tendons that kind of come from the back of our ears, comes around and connects to our collarbone here. So if we imagine the ears are here, these two tendons come down and around, connecting to our collarbone. And then we have, depending on how muscular your character is, if you want to draw more definition in these shoulder muscles here, or neck muscles, back muscles. Now the other thing here, so I'm not going to go into it too much right this second, but it's all interconnected. So we have this muscle comes down here, and then we have our shoulder muscle overlaps it. All right, so chest. Since I didn't draw a head, I don't have exactly a head to measure here. I'm going to kind of guess how big the head would be. Move it down. So probably the bottom of the chest would probably sit around here. Obviously we have our division here of the chest. And the chest does have a little division with the shoulder here. The main chest muscle is going to come from the armpit and down to where our measurement was for one head length down. Everyone with me so far? I haven't lost anyone yet? So, while I wait for comments to come in, to help with getting the shape of the chest right, I like to draw a diagonal line coming from the collarbone here, so that basically so it forms a 90-degree angle. So from here to here, that should be a 90-degree angle, and that should be pretty much where the corners of the chest hit. Also, if you were so inclined, that's around where the nipples would hit on the chest. But I don't know what Twitch's policy is on that, so I'm going to erase those before I get in trouble. So the details with the muscles, the chest muscles here, do depend on the individual you're drawing. If you pick up any of those like bodybuilding magazines, you'll see all varieties of shapes to the chest here. So I'm going to just show you how I like to draw them, and you can look up references on your own and see how it differs from how I like to draw it, and you just take what works best for you and what fits your aesthetic. This is where I failed due to the placement of the muscles on the arms and the chest. Okay. So let's get a little bit more on the chest here, and then we can and then we'll do the rest of the torso, and if we have time, then I'll kind of show how the arms fit in. So the chest muscles, if you're drawing someone very muscular, and they just have those rippling like grooves in their chest, they're all going to come out from this armpit section here, and they're going to try to get to the center chest. So again, if I'm drawing the rippling part of the muscles, this person's just hits the gym for 3 hours every day. They're going to have that ripple that kind of comes up to the collarbone from there. Next part comes down here. Next part's going to come up like that. Something like that. And then I usually like to draw from the armpit here. I usually like to draw a little bit of a shadow. It's usually a little bit of a area there, and the chest usually kind of thins out at the bottom here and it comes up. That muscle just a little bit. And again, this is usually how I like to draw muscles. And this is, I should also be clear, this is also how muscles look when the arms are kind of down by their side. The shape of the chest muscle is going to change whether you're raising the arms, raising the shoulders, reaching forward, reaching back. The chest muscle will stretch and contract and expand depending on what you're doing. So this shape is going to be mostly just for the arms down by its side. Maybe raise a little bit, but nothing like with the arms above the head. So, with that in mind, next head length down. My guesstimates is going to be about here. So this is about where our waist is going to be. So in this, once we start getting to the torso, the lower torso muscles here, or mid-torso muscles, you want to keep in mind that our bodies, though very round, have sides. We have a front, we have a side, we have a back. It's very cubish. So I'm going to define here, this is going to be where the front of our body is here. And this is going to be our sides. So with that in mind, now, again, I'm drawing a very muscular person here. So the body, since we're drawing a more muscular person, they're going to have a more Dorito shape to their body. Okay. So Now, the reason I kind of define this is because when we draw our arms in a little bit, the arms are at our side and are going to overlap this part of our body. A lot of people want to pretend like this part is going to be in front of the arms because it's part of the torso, but it's the side of our torso, which means our arms, when they come down to our side, is going to cover them up. And again, if I'm going to go really muscular, you'll actually be able to see some of the back muscles here. Now there's 5 little triangle tube muscles here that come down this way. A lot of the times you don't really get to see them because the arms are covering them up. And on real life people, you have to be really ripped to be able to very clearly see those muscles. Most people, you can't see that muscle. Even when I was in my peak physical condition in high school on the swim team, you only barely saw these muscles on me. You have to be super, super, super fit to see those clearly. Anyway. All right, so now we'll talk about the in-between muscles here in a second, but we want to kind of have our abs here. Our abs sit pretty cleanly into where our rib cage is. Although, again, depending on how physically fit you are, you might see some muscles up here connecting to the chest. I typically don't like to draw those just because it doesn't really add anything to the figure. It doesn't really make them look extra cool or anything. So let me kind of just draw where the center line for our abs are going to be. So I usually like, again, for most, everyone's a little different. If you see someone with if you look at those weightlifting magazines where you just see people just rippling with muscles, you're going to see a lot of different sizes and shapes for abs. There's no definitely one way to do this. The way that works for me and I think looks cool is the abs themselves I like to do in kind of a triangle pointed up fashion, where the sides of the muscles I like to kind of do in lines pointed down this way. I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. So I like to have the sides of the muscles kind of pointed in and have the tops and bottoms of the muscles kind of pointing up. And I also like to kind of make these divisions like little triangles. I just think they look cool that way. It gives the abs a little bit more depth. And so then to connect kind of our side muscles, depending on how ripped you want this character to look, I then like to draw muscles kind of coming in, kind of creating this V form here. And if you really want that V shape for your dudes, you can always kind of create that little shape there. If you're so inclined. And then that kind of handles the line art for the most part, but I always like to add a little bit of shadow here just to add some cool depth. sometimes when you're drawing, it's important to kind of make a decision of what lines are important to keep in and which ones are good to keep out. Like if I had the light source coming this way, I would probably like leave out a lot of the top lines here and then really emphasize the shadows on this side of the muscle. And in a nutshell, without pulling out an anatomy book and demonstrating every single muscle in the torso, that's usually how I handle muscles in the torso. Yeah, since I'm drawing a quite muscular person, I'm gonna emphasize these neck muscles here. So while I kind of clean this up a little bit, do you guys have any questions on the torso muscles or how to draw them? And if you guys don't, I'll kind of move on to drawing arms, at least in this position. Sit right here. No questions from sideways. So I'm going to erase these back muscles because once I start drawing the arm, they're going to get covered up, so there's no point in me keeping them here. Alright, so since no one else has thrown down any comments, I'm just going to assume we're good to move on to some arms here. So when we're talking muscles in general, it doesn't matter if we're talking the torso, arms, legs, whatever. All the muscles overlap each other. It's very common, I see, with people who are learning to draw anatomy. They want to put like the parts of the body like right next to each other because it makes sense, right? But in fact, they don't just go up against each other, they overlap each other. Like our shoulder overlaps our bicep, our forearm overlaps our bicep overlaps our forearm a little. There's always a little bit of overlapping happening. And you can kind of see that here with this drawing. You can kind of see the neck comes here, but the shoulder overlaps that part of the muscle just a little bit. And then when we come down here and do our bicep, remember our bicep's going to sit, when we talked about our proportions here, our bicep sits, or I say bicep, I mean more the elbow is going to sit right above where the belly button's going to be. So the belly button's probably about here, so the elbows are going to sit right above that. Now, one good thing to keep in mind, the biceps are going to face out if the elbows are pointed in. if the elbows are pointed out, the bicep is going to point inward. So I'm going to draw this character with the elbows out. So the biceps is going to point inward here. The biceps, since this character's arms are going to be extended, the biceps are going to be stretched out here. When you bring your muscle up, that bicep condenses, and the bicep's going to look rounder at that point. So since this character's his arms is going to be down by his side, his biceps are going to look more elongated here. The shoulder's going to come around, overlap the bicep just a little bit. And it's also going to overlap the tricep. Now we can't clearly see the tricep from this position, but it does kind of come out a little bit, almost like a little triangle here. And then the second part of the tricep comes down and meets into the elbow. So now that I kind of have the arms done, I can put the back muscles back in. All right. So now for the forearm, again, like I said, everything overlaps. So we have the forearm is going to start up here. It's not going to start down here where the bicep ends. It's going to start above where the bicep is. On both sides. Our arms, here, I'm going to draw this on here. Think of your arms as kind of like a chain link. If we have, here's one chain part of the link, here's the second part here, here's the next part here, so if you think about it this way, this is our shoulder, this is our bicep, and this is our forearm. So the way everything kind of interlocks, so we have the forearm here goes above where the bicep's going to be. So we have our bicep here. So the forearm is going to connect above that, here and here on top of the bicep. And the forearm kind of takes on this shape where it's kind of thins out. It's kind of the major part of the muscles at the beginning and kind of thins out towards the wrist. In fact, the entire arm gets thinner as it gets further away from the body. It's thicker at the shoulder than it is at the elbow. It's thicker at the elbow than it is at the wrist. I'm not sure I'm going to have enough time to get into all the mechanics of how our arm muscles work here. But remember that your arms have two bones in it. You have one bone that connects to the inside part of your elbow, and that goes to the pinky side of your hand. And then you have another bone that goes on the outside of your elbow and goes to the thumb part of your hand. And it's always connected that way. So that means when your hand is like this, your two bones are like this. But when you twist your hand over like this bone is still connected to the inside here. So it goes like this, where this bone goes over this way. So those bones essentially twist over each other. So when you're drawing your hand, your arm, you have your arm, when it's flat like this, the two bones are going to be more parallel, and so are the muscles. But when you twist it, those muscles are going to twist over. And that's what I'm portraying here, is this muscle is starting on the outside here and is twisting over to the arm, because this is where the thumb side of this hand is going to be. And then this muscle here, can't really see a whole lot of because it's twisting around the underside of the arm to where the pinky side is. So same thing here. So it's going to come around, overlap here. Kind of running out of a little bit of space, so this might have to go off a little bit. So this muscle twists around like this. Wow, this is messy. I hope this isn't too messy for you guys, because treating this more like a sketch than like a finished drawing, so I hope my sketchiness isn't confusing you guys. Yes, I will use it to help me adding muscles to my arms. Good, I hope this helps. I'm going to measure from the shoulder to the elbow, elbow to the wrist. This is about there. So in a nutshell, again, without me pulling out an anatomy book and going into detail about every single muscle in the arm and the torso, that is our basic musculature of the torso, front of the torso, and our arms, at least the front of the arms. Does that make sense to everyone? Do you guys have any follow-up questions? Anything like that? Oh, it looks like I got a new follower. Thanks. Is that Amalos? I hope I said that right. Welcome and thank you. And I guess I should say, Twitch always gives me reminders saying, hey, you should ask your watchers to follow every hour. And I rarely do that, but I'm going to do that now. If you've been enjoying this, why not give a follow? Alright, so I guess right now we're just waiting to see if you guys have any follow-up questions for these muscles. This is kind of more of a, as you can see, very sketchy, but hopefully it gets the point across clearly. You understand what I'm talking about. I guess, oh, how long have we been going? Hour 45? We can talk a little bit about the legs if you guys want. We should be able to do that in about 15 minutes or so. So let me shrink this up a bit. Oops. Let's keep our proportions. I think you'll just refer back to this whenever you need to draw muscles. Well, good. I hope this will help. I know Twitch only keeps this archived for about 2 weeks, so if you need to reference this after the 2 weeks, you can go to my YouTube channel My YouTube channel is just youtube.com/ Shadows of Oblivion. And yeah, I archive all my streams there. So if I'm pretty sure by now my hands tutorial's probably been taken down off of Twitch just because it's been 2 weeks. So if you want to see my hand tutorial, that's up on my YouTube channel. My face tutorial, all that stuff is up on my YouTube. If you came back to here to Twitch and a video you're looking for is gone, it's on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's talk quickly about legs. And then I'll probably call it a night because I still need to upload my comic update for this week. And I haven't created my Webtoons update yet, so I gotta, after this stream, I still got some work to do tonight. Okay, so legs. In general, when we're talking legs straight, looking straight ahead at the leg, it takes on the shape of the letter B. So imagine this is our upper leg, our lower leg, there's our knee. So it looks like the letter B, but obviously it's not quite like that because that's pretty ridiculous. All right. So the inside of our leg here is going to be, relatively speaking, pretty straight. And the outside is going to have that curve going to it. And then for the lower leg, again, distance from the hip to knee, same as from the knee to the ankle. It's going to curve out like that. We'll just have the feet going off the page here. So this leg obviously is going to be a reverse B, more straight on the inside, curved on the outside. All right, so muscles. We have a line that goes basically from our hip here across the leg, kind of like into, not quite, but close to the groin area. And that becomes the top part of our quadricep here, or helps divide that top part of the quadricep. The next part is going to come out this way, kind of curve in, meeting the knee there. And then the third muscle, kind of the same thing on the other side. Again, I'm kind of exaggerating the muscles here, making this guy extremely muscular, probably more than what you probably will draw them, but good to cover it anyway. So same thing here. So we have the muscle kind of comes up and over this way, around, meeting in with the knee here. We have this another part of the quadricep on this part, third part here, fourth part there. And then when it comes to the calf muscles here, our shin bone's like right in front. If we kind of imagine, you don't necessarily draw this part, but just to help you imagine, we have our shin bone in front here. And the calf muscle's in the back of our leg. It's not in the front of it. So it's unlike our abs and our chest and our quadricep muscles, where you're going to see a lot of definition. You don't see a lot of definition of the calves from the front. You would see way more from the back. But from the front, we mostly just see kind of how they connect to the back of the knee here. So we have kind of the shin here, we have the muscle there. So again, I'm making this guy super muscular. It looks a little funny with his feet cut off at the bottom, but... So that's my quick and dirty lesson on muscles, how to draw the muscles of the body. Again, without going into the very specifics, pulling out an anatomy book, demonstrating every single muscle and being very specific in their shapes. This is how I approach muscles. Of course, when I draw my superheroes or just fantasy characters, I stylize it, I exaggerate it. So there's some. If you pull out an anatomy book, you'd probably see some muscles that I kind of excluded, or I might have embellished on the shape of some of these muscles just to make the character more aesthetically pleasing to my tastes. To make them look cooler than they might look if they were real life, if I was drawing realistic shapes. But this is still close. It's very close. The muscles are in the right place. They're the right shapes. I just might have put my own taste on the shapes. Like, I like, for instance, good example is like the bicep. I really like having my characters more angular. So you see how my biceps are more square, the triceps are more triangular, just because I find that angular shapes look cooler, at least in my opinion, when we're talking muscular or powerful looking characters. Muscles usually aren't that angular. So I think with that, I'll open it back up to you guys. Do you guys have questions, concerns, fears, existential crises? I hope this was helpful to everyone. Talking with, proportions. If you guys are, any of you are watching and joined me late, I started with the body proportions of an average adult human. Then we talked a little bit about the shape of children there, or how the proportions differ with children, I should say. How fantasy or imaginary characters, how the proportions would differ with them. The reasons you would alter the proportions and break the rules of proportion. And obviously that's for creating some kind of creepy monsters or unsettling monsters. Then we talked a little bit about anthropomorphic creatures and how to approach drawing them with proportions. And then we talked about muscles. So, any questions? Good stream, man. Thanks. You're welcome. Love the tips and tricks you shared. Okay, Glad this was helpful. So, while I wait for any more comments to come in, I just want to let you guys know, once I kind of wait for chats to come in, thanks for the tips and tricks. Okay, good. I'm glad this was helpful to you guys. So I think with that, like I said, I do need to get Shadows of Oblivion, the newest page, uploaded. And I also need to create the actual update for the Webtoons version of Shadows of Oblivion for tomorrow. So I think I'm going to go do that. If you guys don't know, Shadows of Oblivion is a comic I write and draw. It's kind of like Final Fantasy crossed with superheroes. You guys can go check that out at shadowsofoblivion.com or the Webtoons. Hold on, I'll put a link there because the Webtoons don't have simple URLs. So here's the Webtoon version of Shadows of Oblivion. Just threw that in the chat. Yeah, so go check that out. It will be up later tonight, however long it takes to upload. Or check out first thing tomorrow, and it'll be up then. And normal obligatory stuff like follow, support me on Patreon, Coffee, PayPal, all the links are down below. And my next stream is going to be Thursday, probably around 2 p.m. It's going to be one of my long streams. I'm going to stream for, I probably won't be on camera or on mic, but I'll be in the chat, and I'm just going to probably stream for anywhere from 4 to 5 hours, just probably working on commissions because I'm really behind on commissions. I need to do some drawings for my patrons as well. So I'll probably be working on that all afternoon on Thursday, and then Saturday we'll probably be doing something else. Oh, Saturday, that's what I'm doing Saturday. For Endgame, I'm going to be drawing Avengers Saturday afternoon. So I'll be doing that. And with that, I am tired of talking, and I think I'm going to call this stream done. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped. And I will see you guys on Thursday. Bye, guys. And I want to thank my patrons again. They make this possible. Angers McBeard, Anthony Docimo, Brian Gilbert, Brooke Clayton, Charles Pinn, DevDuck01, Elizabeth, Lawrence Winston. Again, sorry, Lawrence, your name's just too long to put on here, so I hope you're okay with the shortening of it. Lily Avonlea, Matt Powell, MC McClure, I should ask you how to say that. Seth Talley, Shadow Macer 66, Taylor Onestry, Tony T. Timonen, and Zariel. Thank you guys. Thank you for being patrons. You're the reason why I can keep on making art. And if you want to become a patron, click on that link below. And now the stream's officially done. Bye, guys.